Hey gang, in this guide, I wanted to go into the dynamics of group play in the game. And the main reason is probably the thing I'm enjoying the most about the game. And I've not come from, any other sort of games where, people gather together and communicate via voice and stuff. I never got into WoW or um, even, I watch other people playing games on the console nowadays. You've got headsets and you're talking to people as you play. Um, so it's fairly new, for example, just being able to communicate by voice whilst playing a game in game with people that you know or just people that you've met in the game. And by far, I'm finding it the the most enjoyable aspect of the game, particularly when it comes to things like what I'm doing now, bounties, daily activities. If you're farming for different materials in different ways, speed running dungeons, um, it's just so much more. It doesn't feel like a chore or grinding because you're still socializing at the same time, having a laugh. And yeah, it's to the extent where, for the most part, if I'm not making a video or just hitting meta farming events, kicking around with a bunch of friendly people that get along and have a chat while we play, and just you know so much easier to enjoy. And then when you get into more engaging content like um, battlegrounds, being able to somewhat organize yourselves and work more as a unit. Even the fact that battlegrounds is 8v8, so you could effectively have two parties of four. Um, in voice chat when there's a understanding of what the different goals strategies are. It's even um, better to have two separate groups as a unit within that game mode as well, so you can do different things. One team might be um, blockading a spawn point. The other team might be, if you're on offense, pushing a guardian or defending a position of importance. So it just makes the game so much better. And to a larger extent, of course, there are the groups you're linked by chat to. There's currently no clan content, but it's a great way to communicate with a bunch of like-minded people, which for the most part, are people you run into at different locations or you've spoken to on World Chat or you helped each other out. So yeah, this is a good clan. And a lot of clans for these types of games will have external online presence, whether it's on forums or a channel Discord set up, so that you can communicate in other ways as well outside. And yeah, it just makes for a far more enjoyable game. And something that can create a bit of conflict is sort of setups for inner group competition. So currently, in future videos, I'll go into more specific factional content about activities and rewards and benefits for the Immortals, of which once the crown is fully ranked, I believe the capacity is something like 400 or 500 players. So there can only ever be that at most. And in the alpha, we've currently held reign for going on our third week. And as you can see, we still have a fair bit to go. So I'd imagine at least another 2 weeks until we could even reach that maximum capacity. And so far, there are things that could be improved to prevent any sort of animosity or conflicts between the group, considering the Immortals are supposed to be, the protectors, guardians against Hell's minions and so forth. Obviously you're going to have some of the best players in there as far as PvP content goes. The methods of maintaining a reign are based off rights, which was one of the first PvP videos I uploaded, and is a 10 groups of battlegrounds, of which the Immortals need to win 5 of those in order to retain the crown on the weekly cycle of strife. So, as far as the story goes, the way that the shadows keep the powerful protectors of the realm, from themselves, so to speak, to maintain good leadership. And the mechanic is interesting in the way that you can't also simply, if you theoretically had the 80 strongest battleground players in Immortals, it is stacked to, it's geared towards an eventual overthrow at some point, given the fact that the longer Immortals hold reign, the stronger buffs the shadow factions and houses get from doing their activities amongst that cycle of strife, it's called. So eventually, they'll get stronger and stronger and stronger in the rights to overcompensate any potential deficit in ability or gear or power towards the Immortals, and ultimately reigns will be overthrown, providing that the mechanism for actually becoming a member of a house and achieving those activities does work, because the one interesting aspect of how it works is, and I'll do more detail on the Shadow faction from probably an alt character. Initially I was thinking I'd need to leave the Immortals, but of course I'll just level up an alt character high enough to actually get in the Shadows and demonstrate the content from that perspective. But the main factor is that, based on like a point system of activity in the Shadows and the ranks of the members of a house, the top 10 houses are the houses that qualify for rights. The Rite of Exile, which is the weekly activity occurring on a Sunday evening, server time. And this is how the reign can be overthrown. And the mechanics of that, if Shadow managed to win 6 of those battleground matches, then the top house, which is already predetermined prior to the rights, so it's not, the team that scores the best victory in the rights, for example, it's the team that's already been the most active and therefore has the highest average score, that would become Immortals, and then all of the current Immortals and the existing houses are then disbanded and become adventurers. So essentially everybody's faction changes if there is an overthrow, which is what occurred in the alpha the first time the AI or the bot Immortals were overthrown. So the top house, Silk, that I was a member in, became the founding members of the Immortals, and then they were able to recruit from the adventurers to Immortals up to capacity. And the same with houses of Shadow and the Immortals. As they progress through the storyline and achieve certain milestones of accumulated contribution and things like that, they rank up, and every time they do, their capacity increases. So, in a sense, because the Immortals are potentially going to be stronger, and it's something that players would want to become a part of, the people that are doing the best in battles, the people that are grinding gear fastest and leveling up as well. In order for the Shadow to actually win, they not only need to have a number of players competitive with those top ranked people that will be going into the rights of exile to defend the reign, but they need to be spread out across those top 10 houses. So I think it was the case in the American server where, there was sort of this battle to try and become the founding members. So all the best players were focusing on getting into the top house so that at the end of the rites of exile, they would become immortal. And as a result, there was not enough people in the lower houses to even win the rights, where they needed to win 6 of the battlegrounds. So for the first week, the reign did not end from the AI bots. And when we did the rights in the server, those battles were quite easy. Not difficult at all, much like the first times you enter the vault before you're having to deal with players coming in to defend. So essentially, the social dynamics around it is you'll have groups of players that are trying to achieve becoming immortal, or part of the immortal faction. But in order to do that, even that process of overthrowing the immortals, there needs to be at least 8 strong members in player versus player content that can be a member of each of the top 10 houses. So if all the power's stacked in one house, then the mortals can quite easily hold reign because they can put strength in every single right, whereas the shadows, if they're all competing to be the next immortals or the founding members of the next immortals, and they're in the top house, then the bottom 9 houses are going to struggle for victory. So obviously, as player groups expand and grow and more people become shadow over time, there will naturally be stronger and stronger people in all the top 10 houses. Time will tell sort of what sort of time frame typical reigns will last. But another element to it, of course, is any organized group can also have alt accounts, alt characters, and potentially try to dominate both the shadows and the immortals. Should their reign be overthrown, they would simply retain power through alt accounts. And one thing that seems a little bit perhaps of an oversight is players can leave the immortal faction or be removed from the immortal faction and become adventurers, at which point an adventurer can be recruited into shadows or immortals, provided there's capacity. But once you become a shadow, you can't leave shadow. You can only change houses from within. So there'll be a lot of sort of jostling for position if people are trying to focus on becoming immortal, or if they just want to focus on getting into a house that can win rights, or however that may be. So there may not even be motivation for the bottom 9 houses to even win the rights, because they're going to lose whatever they've accumulated in their house, their ranking, the benefits, because once the reign is overthrown, particularly if the top house is just going to continue the reign of the immortals subvertly through control by alt characters, then there becomes the issue of what's the motivation to win your own right for your house when you're just going to have your house reset and have to reform again and start from the beginning. So it's one element that'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and depending on, I don't think the alpha's going to be a long enough period of time to really see how that plays out. Perhaps the beta, but I would expect that type of content to really be explored and understood once the full release of the game comes out. So it seems like a good concept in a way of changing the way people organize, even to the extent guilds can have 150 members, but potentially there can be 400, 500 players as Immortal when the crown's fully ranked. So, you know, how that structure of community works as far as clans. You know, will clans be everyone Immortal, everyone Shadow? And even though there's essentially competition in the Vault, for example, there's not a great deal of benefit for conflict between the players. Often in games where you're trying to compete against other groups, you know, it just creates rivalries and a bit of disunity amongst the actual players of the game. They can get quite attached to whatever group that they're associated with, and so things like, you know, helping other people and sharing information. You know, people try to, you know, if they figure out something, rather than sharing it so that the whole community can grow and benefit, you know, they just want their group of friends or players to benefit, rather than, you know, expanding the whole community and essentially the content of the game. The faster everybody learns things, the faster everyone gets towards the end game content. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and I'm curious on anyone's opinions about how they think that will work, or any improvements that could be made to that, particularly with regards to things like competition within factions that can create rifts between players and arguments about fairness and things like that. I think it's definitely in any game developer's interest to provide content that is more inclined for people to cooperate and work together than to compete against each other, just for that simple social interaction element of the game. The more chances for conflict, and even without chances for conflict, there's always going to be just personal conflicts that arise in communities. But content that sort of drives you to cooperate because there's an obvious mutual benefit generally just creates a better kind of community. So I'll leave it at that, and cart's coming up, and for a second I thought it was 6:30, not 4:30. And yeah, so please feel free to comment and discuss on, if you're currently playing in the alpha, your experiences, or suggestions about how you think it might improve. I will be doing a series once the guides are complete on feedback, where I'm able to get into a party chat in order to discuss their experiences with the game, and perhaps provide a simpler means than typing out every individual bug or suggestion or criticism of how the developers have done certain things in the game. I know there's a lot of discussion amongst the Immortals about certain features and also some very simple suggestions that most people agree would improve, you know, the motivation, for example, or the reason to want to be one faction or another. Even, for example, adventurers currently have just the singular benefit of being able to purchase Scornia from the Honor Merchant in order to unlock higher Reliquary ranks, which is still quite a small benefit. It's not a lot of Scornia they can get, as opposed to the rewards from tasks and activities from the Shadow or Immortal factions. In the next videos I plan to do are more specific to the actual activities of each faction. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.